Today's inaugural, very exciting, Health and Fitness Forum is a great way to celebrate National Health and Fitness Day. Thank you to the CHFI team for your hosting and for really all you do, and for all of you for being here today. All of us here today understand the value and importance of physical activity. We also understand the urgency behind getting all Canadians to lead active lives. We know that regular physical activity improves physical and mental health, contributing to the overall well-being of individuals and communities. But translating this knowledge into daily action is complex, and it's nuanced, and it can be quite frustratingly complicated. And this is what makes the work of organizations like CHFI really important, because CHFI is raising awareness around physical activity, helping individuals and communities become more active through initiatives such as John mentioned, the Let's Move Canada Challenge that launched today. At the federal government level, for the very first time in the history of our country, we have a minister responsible for physical activity. It's a really big deal. So historically, physical activity had actually fallen under the responsibility of the Minister of Health, which meant that, physical activity was competing for time and resources and focus with other urgent and important health matters. Having a minister at the cabinet table squarely focused on physical activity is game-changing. Not only does this send a very clear message to Canadians that physical activity is a priority for our government, but it allows for a physical activity lens to be put on all Government of Canada decisions. So this allows us, for example, to embed physical activity into considerations in our housings policy and our transportation policy. Into these investments, my job literally is to sit around the cabinet table and make sure when my fellow ministers are making these submissions to cabinet and we're making big decisions, that physical activity is taken into consideration. So it allows us, think about climate action. It allows us to kind of put a physical activity lens on the decisions we're making around climate action. And it also allows us to consider the economic impact, so the cost, the impact on jobs, the impact on productivity of physical inactivity. So it's a very important step, I would say, to kind of raising the profile and the importance of this issue within government. And then you add to that the possibilities that are created by pairing physical activity with sport. So physical activity and sport have historically been joined in law. We have the Physical Activity and Sport Act, and they've been joined in policy. We have the Canadian Sport Policy, which has a physical activity aspect to it, but they've never been under one minister. So we've had, again, the health minister responsible for physical activity, and the heritage minister, and sometimes the sport minister responsible for sport. So of course this has led to programming challenges, resulted in inconsistency or kind of uncertainty for stakeholders. And now with physical activity and sport under a single minister, again, we have an opportunity to better align physical activity and sport policy, programming, and engagement. Because we all know that sport, and Jack will tell you, good sport, can be a very powerful vehicle. I'm keen to break down these silos. I'm a systems thinker. I like to fix systems. We now have a broad range of stakeholders. We have the potential reach of our programs. The way that we can interact with provinces and territories has changed. This has all gotten a lot bigger. And it's very exciting from a Government of Canada point of view. So I'll talk more about the Government of Canada, the work we're doing shortly. But we really need to dig in on the state of physical activity in this country, because the reality is more and more Canadians are spending their waking hours occupied by sedentary activities. Canadians' increasingly inactive lifestyles and habits are reflected in the research, which tells us that only about half of adults in Canada get the recommended amount of physical activity they should be getting each week, and less than half of children and youth are getting the recommended amount of daily physical activity they need. 50% of kids today are spending more than the recommended 2 hours or less per day on their screens. Existing trends towards less movement were exacerbated by the extraordinary circumstances of the global pandemic. the effects of which continue to affect Canadians, especially young people today. We've seen how the interruption of organized sports, access to recreation facilities and programs, and the loss of routines really impacted many young people at critical periods in their development. A recent report from Statistics Canada shows deep declines in the physical activity levels of young people and high increases in their daily screen time since the pandemic, and that won't surprise any of you. I have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old. I can totally relate to that. And this reality isn't unique to Canada. Rising physical inactivity is a global issue. In fact, the World Health Organization has identified physical activity as being a risk factor for global mortality. Because we all know many chronic diseases, including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer, are often preventable through managing behavioral risk factors such as improving physical activity and fitness. And we also know that a lack of physical activity doesn't just take a toll on our physical health. It also negatively impacts our mental health, and this is especially so for our children. We also know that a less active population is more reliant on its healthcare system. Conversely, when people are physically active, our healthcare system is less stressed and can better deliver high-quality care. So the consequences of inactivity are quite clear. They are social, they are economic, they are environmental. Inactivity impacts our physical health, our mental health, and it impacts our communities. But you know that one solution is very clear. Canadians need to move, and we need to move more. We need to make the active choice the easy choice, the first choice. So these days, I'm very preoccupied with what I see as the need to take a really systemic approach, a whole of government approach to physical inactivity. And in fact, lately I've been challenged to think bigger than that. We need to think a whole of society approach. So what does this mean? Well, first it means coordinating our efforts and aligning our systems. We need new partnerships. I'm very excited to be hosting a roundtable soon on physical activity for a cross-section of physical activity stakeholders, including CHFI, many who have never worked together, many who have been working in silos. Some are better at it than others, but the system that we have developed has really lent itself to very siloed behavior. People are reinventing the wheel, people aren't sharing knowledge, and this is not a criticism of these organizations who work super, super hard. It's actually a reflection on the system that we've developed. So I'm hoping this roundtable, which will focus on addressing why physical sedentary behavior and inactivity levels remain super high in Canada, I'm hoping that this is the first step in breaking down some of those silos, in convening people and partners differently so that we can really attack some of the challenges that are faced with us. But it also requires us to work really closely as a government with provinces and territories because, of course, you know, there's a jurisdictional necessity, I guess I would call it, because, of course, health and education are provincial jurisdiction, but that doesn't mean we can't do this. It just means that we have to work really closely together, and we have to create new partnerships. We have to look beyond the traditional sport minister to sport minister dynamic. We have to get the physical activity minister talking to provincial transport ministers, talking to provincial housing ministers. We need to leverage what we're doing now because there is money being invested. It's just not being maximized. We need to kind of reorient what we're doing and how we think about a lot of these initiatives and do it smarter, for lack of a better way of putting it. Second, it means investing in research and measurement, including research to better understand how we can design our communities to make the active choice the easy choice, but also measuring the cost, as both John and I think Jack would tell you, the cost of both our action and our inaction, because it's costly. And third, it really means removing barriers and addressing inequities. Because quite frankly, not everyone in Canada experiences or has access to opportunities to lead healthy and active lifestyles. I strongly believe we need to invest in community organizations, so the people who are on the ground and who work daily to improve the lives of members of the community. So the people who understand the barriers that people continue to face. A really good example is what we're doing in a program called the Sport for Social Development in Indigenous Communities program. So this is where we're giving community leaders funding to deliver physical activity and sport initiatives at the local level, led by local leaders who know their communities best. And the results are coming in. You know, we also have what we call the Healthy Canadians and Communities Funds, which again supports programs focus on addressing behavioral risk factors and really targets underrepresented populations. You know, what Jack didn't mention is I come from a human rights background. I was a human rights lawyer, and I'm very interested in making sure that we remove barriers to full participation in society writ large. But in this case, we make sure physical activity opportunities are available to everyone. And then finally, and I think John will like hearing this one, it means meeting Canadians where they are. And so for me, this means getting physical activity back in schools. So I know you guys agree. You know, children in Canada have access to public education. So to put it bluntly, they are a captive audience in an existing system. They're already there. You know, so creating an active Canada, making the active choice the easy choice, means providing inclusive and welcoming physical activity opportunities at an early age in places where kids spend their time, which is school. You know, kids can build healthy habits just as easy as they can build unhealthy habits. They can learn and really come to understand the feeling of health and even the feeling of joy that can come with moving your body and being active, and they can appreciate how physical activity can help them learn better, can help them manage their anxiety, can help them have a more positive outlook on life. Having physical activity in my portfolio allows me to work with the education sector, with education ministers, to really make this happen, and that's something that I'm very keen to do. So I hope you can see that I bring a lot of joy and a lot of hope to my job. I see so much opportunity ahead of us, but I also see a lot of work. So thank you for doing that work, and thank you for doing that work. I really appreciate you having me here today, and I really look forward to the conversation. Thank you.